And now let me welcome onto the field of 68, Jim Root, who is the best looking of the trio, three-man weave, and is one of our gambling experts here, and a guy that I know knows way more about betting odds, betting lines, and how to be a profitable gambler than just about anybody that I know. Jim, obviously there are some weird things going on with Temple basketball, with the line movement yesterday. It's not the first time this has happened. So explain it to me like I am a 12-year-old. What is happening with Temple? What is happening with these lines? And why is there, according to Pat Forty of Sports Illustrated, an investigation opened by U.S. Integrity, which is basically a watchdog for casinos and sports books and gambling in the United States?
Yeah, so basically any game has a typical projected point spread, and this is via Gamblers, or you can go on KenPom, Bart Torvik, any of those analytical websites, and they project what the score of the game is going to be based on how the teams have been so far this year. And all those systems had Temple versus UAB yesterday as UAB like a 1 or 2 point favorite, right about in that vicinity. I think Sportsbooks opened at -2.5 in some places. And that seemed right. It seemed okay. That's about lining up with all the computers. This makes sense. But then for about an hour yesterday, UAB just was getting bet like crazy over and over and over, very publicly in very visible places, sports books that would move the line. And it went from 2.5 to 3, 3.5 to 4, 4.5. And it just going up. And at this point in the year, there's enough evidence out there on teams that people kind of know how good each team is generally. So if you see a line move 1 point, 2 points, it's okay. That's reasonable. But anything more than that, you start to wonder what's going on. For me, myself, betting, if I see like a 3 point movement right now, I'm like, I must have missed an injury. Did somebody get hurt at the end of last game? So that was my first thought. Like, did Isaiah Miller for Temple roll his ankle in the final play or something, and he's going to be out? And people know about it, so they're getting against Temple here. And there's just no information like that. There's no suspension news, nothing that would indicate, all right, somebody knows something, you got to get on UAB. And the fact that it got all the way to 8, I mean, 6 point moves, that like never happens. It just doesn't. So started to get really fishy at that point. And you mentioned it wasn't the first time this has happened for Temple. They played Memphis back on February 8th, and the line did the same thing. Over the course of an hour, it moved like 4 points. There was no injury, no real justification for it. So you just start to get a little suspicious on why that's happening. It would seem, typically, like if you look at the Arizona State example from a couple of years ago, the Headache Smith thing, a bettor is working with the player, and that's kind of how the relationship works. So it's not like the players are betting this game themselves. It would be somebody on the outside that's working with them and giving them a cut or something. That's what would happen if that's the case here. So just to see that kind of line movement with no justification, no injury, no suspension, that's when the eyebrows go up and you start to think something might be wrong here.
Yeah, to put all this into context, Marquette played at Creighton on Saturday. That line opened at 4.5. Word kind of got out that Tyler Kolek probably wasn't playing, and it climbed up to 7.5. And then about 20 minutes before tip-off, I think it was 30 minutes before tip-off, it comes out that Oso Ighodaro is also not going to be playing because of an illness, which was not on my radar. I don't know if it was on your radar.
No,
Also
no one's
Ighodaro is
radar.
like an all Big East center, and the line went from 7.5 to 8.5. So Marquette was missing their two best players on the road, and the line moved 4 points in a full day. The Temple UAB line moved 6 points in an hour. Have you ever seen anything like this before? And have you ever seen anything like that happening with the same team twice in the same season? That seems to me, look, I don't bet as much as you do. I'm more the guy that donates to Bet MGM than someone that wins at Bet MGM. But I don't remember seeing things like that before.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it multiple times. I've seen games here and there where I couldn't explain it and there wasn't an injury. And I think the 2019-20 season, there was a Navy versus Mount St. Mary's game. Yes, I know, very obscure here. But Navy just kept getting bet. I couldn't figure out why. I was betting Mount St. Mary's against the Steam because I was like, I don't find any injuries here. There's nothing going on. And it went from like 4-9, and Navy won by 11. And I'm not saying anything happened there, but there were no injuries. It was strange. I didn't know what was going on. But for it to happen like this, especially, you mentioned the injuries only moving at 4. It's like, think about somebody like shoplifting. If they took some candy and put it in their pockets, it's probably never going to get noticed. If you know the door guy on your way out, he can kind of
Mhm.
let you slip by with something small. But if you try to put a 90-inch flat screen under your t-shirt, like, people are going to see it. Like, this was so obvious. It's not just like workers at books. It's other customers, other bettors were seeing this. It was just really clear as day that it was happening, or something was going on. The line moving that much is just so extreme. No, I haven't seen it multiple times. And that's just kind of the brazenness of it, and sort of the obvious. It was like, this is their last chance to really get a big bet in. So let's take home all the profits we can. Let's grab everything off the shelves we can and try to walk out the front door. And when you do it like that, that's when you set off the alarms. And that's what happened.
Yeah. So what does it take to move a line like that? Are we talking thousands of people betting $20? Are we talking about like a couple of people betting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars? Like, I don't know if you necessarily have specifics in this case, but generally speaking, for a line to move like that, what are we talking about there in terms of handle?
Typically, it's more about who's betting than the amount. If it's somebody that has been a consistent winner at a sports book, or a consistent beater of the line, where it's like, all right, this guy bets -3, the game closes 5 every time, he's probably got the right side. Somebody else is going to come in and bet. They know the direction the line is moving. That's when the bookmakers will move it. It's typically about the person. Like, if Floyd Mayweather came and said, I want to bet $1 million on Hofstra -3, maybe they'd move it some because they want to hide liability, but it's more about getting the line right, and trying to have the correct line. And Floyd Mayweather's not telling them that the line should move. I don't think he has any Hofstra inside knowledge. So it typically is because it's coming from a bettor that has been getting it right. And that seems to maybe be the case here. Somebody that's been winning, and if they had inside knowledge, of course, it's easier to win. But that would be my guess, is it was coming from somebody who's been at that book, has been sort of respected action. And if they just kept going, it seems like there was just no price they wouldn't take. Like, oh, you're just going to repost it at 4, I'll take 4. You're going to repost it at 4.5, I'll take 4.5. It seemed like somebody had extreme confidence that no matter what the number was showing, they were still willing to put more and more money down, which, again, another kind of alarm bell there.
So I've always been of the mindset that when you have, let's just assume, right, that this is a situation of point shaving or something like that, right? Just to kind of put together a theory here. I've always said that if that's going to be happening in a regulated market where you have legal gambling, it's the kind of thing that's going to get picked up quickly, right? It's the kind of thing that's going to get recognized like it did in this situation. You picked it up before the game even started, right? I think you were on with Tim Murray and those guys over on Visa and talking about it. And the clip has kind of gone like semi-viral, and nobody is tagging you on Twitter because your Twitter handle is Second Chance Points instead of Jim Rue. Maybe you should fix that, man. Maybe you should make yourself a little bit more recognizable. But I've always said that having a regulated market, you can pick up on these things faster than if gambling wasn't legal. You're always going to find people that are going to want to bet on sports. That's always going to exist. And the way to kind of sniff out people doing bad things, people are always going to want to try to do something like this because it's a way to make a quick buck. That's just the world that we live in, right? I think having the regulated markets is what's allowed you to pick up on this stuff fairly quickly. And that's how you kind of snuff this stuff out, is you keep those watchdogs in place. You have it be legalized. You have it be in a setup where people can very quickly identify something like that is happening.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of like, oh, the league's getting in bed with the sports books and look what happens kind of reaction to this. It's like, this has been happening. It happens. It happens probably more. Like you said, if it's a black market, if there's no
Mhm.
legal monitoring of it. I mean, look at anything that's illegal. People find ways to get it, and the price goes up more and you make more money from it. This way you have a better chance at regulating it. And I would think, if you do it subtly, if you do it small, there's probably ways to get away with it. In fact, I'm almost certain there would be. But if you go too big, you try to make too big of a splash, and you do it at the wrong places, the wrong sports books, then yeah, pick it up, and a company like US Integrity is going to investigate. And I like back to the Arizona from 1994. They did it for 5, 6 games. It was almost a month. Like they got a lot of games in, and that's when there was no regulation on that kind of market. It was just a guy with bags of cash going around to different casinos in Vegas, and that's harder to pick up. But people are betting online. You know what account it's coming from. Like we said, you know it's from a winning account. That stuff is almost easier to sniff out, and it seemed like that was the case yesterday.
Yeah, and I think most books that game was pulled off the board by mid-afternoon, right? Like, were you able to still kind of get action on it as you got closer to tip-off?
I think you could have, and I mentioned it got all the way up to -8, and then it closed 7. So that would tell me that there somebody smart looked, saw there was no injuries, and was like, "Look, I made 3. That's what I think it should be. So I'm going to take all this numerical value without knowing that maybe there's something nefarious going on behind the scenes." And obviously they, lost by a lot. But the fact that, there was even some buyback, it wasn't like some grand sweeping conspiracy across the country. It was probably just a small group that had knowledge or had a relationship with somebody. If that's what's going on, then not everybody's in on it, because the fact that it went back the other way right at the final seconds or leading up to game time tells me someone didn't know.
I like how you said if it was somebody smart, because that's exactly the kind of thing that I would do, and that's why I always end up donating my money to BetMGM. Listen, Jim, I appreciate the time. Thank you for providing some insight on what happened here, and as always, we'll see you soon, man. I'm going to see you in Vegas, right? You're going to be out there.
Absolutely, looking forward to it. All kinds of shows, and we'll be doing shows there ourselves, and I'm sure we'll run into each other at least at the blackjack table. Come on.
Yeah, you better not big time me. That's all I'm saying.
I wouldn't dare.
All right, I'll see you, man. Thank you.